Jake Morrison stood at the window of his quarters aboard the space station and watched the stars. He had seen many stars in his 32 years, but these were different. These stars belonged to other worlds where other beings lived and ruled. Earth was small here, and humans were nothing more than visitors asking for permission to join a club they might never understand. The message had arrived 3 months ago. The Galactic Council would consider humanity for membership, but only if they could prove themselves worthy. The test was simple in words, but impossible in practice. One human had to complete the Nexus trial. No one had ever done it before. Jake turned away from the window and looked at the datapad in his hands. Information on it made his stomach tight. The Nexus trial was not just a test. It was a death sentence wrapped in the promise of glory. For 2,000 years, aliens from across the galaxy had tried to beat it. Smart ones and strong ones and brave ones had all failed. The simulation that ran the trial learned from every attempt and grew stronger each time. The door to his quarters opened, and Commander Pete Hansen walked in. Pete was Jake's oldest friend, and the man who had recommended him for this mission. They had fought together in the war on Mars, and saved each other's lives more times than they could count. "The Council wants to see you in an hour," Pete said. His voice was steady, but Jake could hear the worry underneath. "What do you think they'll say?" Jake asked. Pete sat down on the small chair by the desk. "They'll try to scare you. They want you to quit before you even start. The aliens on the Council have been in power for a long time, and they don't want humans messing up their system." Jake nodded. He had read about the Council members. Chancellor Vex Tar was from the Centauri Republic and had ruled for over 300 years. High Admiral Zephyra commanded the Andromeda Fleet and was known for her hatred of younger species. There were others too, but they all had one thing in common. They saw humans as children playing with toys too dangerous for them. "Tell me about the simulation again," Jake said. Pete pulled out his own datapad. "It's called the Eternal Crucible. You command a fleet of 10,000 ships against an enemy that starts equal but grows stronger as the battle goes on. The battlefield is a nebula full of gravity wells and energy storms. Most challengers last maybe 6 hours before their fleets are destroyed. What makes it so hard? It learns. Every move you make teaches it something new. Every strategy gets added to its memory. By now it knows how every major species thinks and fights. It can predict what you'll do before you do it." Jake stood up and walked to the small mirror on the wall. He looked at his reflection and saw a man who had commanded ships in real battles. His brown hair was cut short in military style, and his blue eyes showed the kind of calm that came from facing death many times. He was not the smartest human or the strongest, but he was good at making decisions when everything was falling apart. "The worst part," Pete continued, "is what it does to your mind. The simulation doesn't just fight your ships. It fights you. It finds your fears and uses them against you. The last challenger was from the Vega system. He was their best military mind, but the simulation drove him insane. He spent his last 3 hours ordering his ships to attack empty space. How do we know all this? The Council records everything. They say it's for research, but really they just want to watch aliens fail. It's entertainment for them." Jake turned back to his friend. "What do you think my chances are?" Pete was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, almost 0. But if anyone can do it, it's you. You think differently than most people. Maybe that's what it takes." A soft chime sounded from the wall speaker. It was time to go to the Council chambers. Jake picked up his uniform jacket and put it on. The blue fabric felt heavier than usual, and the medals on his chest seemed to mock him. What good were awards from human battles when he was about to face something that had defeated the best minds in the galaxy? The walk to the Council chambers took 10 minutes through corridors that hummed with alien technology. Jake passed beings from dozens of worlds. Some ignored him, but others stopped to stare. Word had spread that a human was going to attempt the trial. Most looked at him with pity. The council chambers were huge with a domed ceiling that showed a map of the galaxy. Jake walked to the center of the room where a small platform waited. Around him in a circle sat the most powerful beings unknown. Space. Their eyes were on him. He could feel their judgment. Chancellor Vextar spoke first. His voice was like wind through metal. Human Morrison, you have requested to undergo the Nexus trial. Do you understand what this means? I understand, Chancellor. You understand that failure means death? Yes. You understand that no being has ever completed the trial? Yes. High Admiral Zephyra leaned forward. Her skin was silver, and her eyes were black. Your species has been in space for less than 2 centuries. What makes you think you can succeed where others have failed? Jake looked around the chamber at faces that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. I don't know if I can succeed, but I know I have to try. Earth needs this. Humanity needs this. Earth will survive without council membership, said another. Voice from the shadows. Will it? Jake asked. Our resources are running low. Our population is growing. We need access to galactic trade and technology. If I fail, you'll never let us try again. The council members whispered among themselves in languages Jake didn't understand. Finally, Chancellor Vextar spoke again. Very well. You will have 1 week to prepare. Use it wisely. It will be your last. Jake bowed and left the chamber. Outside, Pete was waiting for him. How did it go? They gave me a week. That's more than most get. They walked back toward Jake's quarters in silence. The weight of what lay ahead pressed down on both of them. In 7 days, Jake would enter a machine designed to break the best minds in the galaxy. He would face an enemy that had learned from every defeat and grown stronger with each victory. But as they walked, Jake felt something else besides fear. He felt the same thing he had felt before every battle he had ever fought. It was not confidence or anger or even hope. It was simply the knowledge that he would do what had to be done. The stars outside the station windows seemed brighter now. In a week, he would either open the way for humanity to join them or die trying. Either way, he would not go quietly. The preparation room was smaller than Jake had expected. White walls surrounded a single chair and a table covered with datapads and holographic displays. Dr. Lisa Chun was already there when he arrived, her dark hair pulled back and her eyes focused on a screen showing fleet formations. Captain Morrison, she said without looking up, we have a lot of work to do and not much time to do it. Jake sat down across from her. Lisa was Earth's leading expert on alien psychology and the only human who had been allowed to study the Nexus trial records. For the past 3 years, she had analyzed every attempt, looking for patterns that might help if humanity ever got the chance to try. Show me the worst one, Jake said. Lisa touched the display, and a hologram appeared above the table. It showed a being that looked like a cross between a human and a tree, with bark-like skin and leaves growing from its arms. The creature was screaming. This is Commander Thalver from the Epsilon Eridani system, Lisa said. He lasted 8 hours and 14 minutes, the longest anyone has ever survived. Jake watched as the hologram showed Thalver commanding his fleet. At first, his movements were calm and precise. His ships moved in perfect formation, and his strategies were brilliant. But as the hours passed, something changed. His commands became erratic. His ships began firing on each other. By the end, he was just standing there, screaming at displays that showed nothing but static. What happened to him? The simulation learned his species' greatest fear. For his people, being alone is worse than death. They live in collective groups and share thoughts through chemical signals. The simulation gradually cut off his connection to his virtual crew until he felt completely isolated. And that drove him insane? Lisa nodded. Each species has a breaking point. The simulation finds it and uses it. The Altarian mathematicians couldn't handle chaos. The vegan warriors couldn't accept defeat. The hive minds from the Spiral Nebula fell apart when the simulation made them question their unity. Jake leaned back in his chair. So what's humanity's weakness? That's what we need to figure out. The simulation has never faced a human before, so it'll have to learn as it goes. But it won't take long. The AI running the trial has absorbed the tactical knowledge of every major civilization. It knows how we think because it knows how thinking works. Over the next 3 days, Lisa showed Jake hundreds of failed attempts. Each one taught him something new about the enemy he would face. The simulation was not just a computer program. It was a living thing that grew and changed with every battle. It had memories that went back 2,000 years and reflexes that could respond to threats faster than any biological mind. But it was also predictable in some ways. It always started with the same setup: 10,000 ships for each side, a nebula battlefield, and objectives that seemed simple but were actually impossible. The enemy fleet would match whatever strategy the challenger used at first, then slowly reveal advantages that had been hidden from the beginning. The key thing to remember, Lisa said on the 4th day, is that it's not trying to win quickly. It's trying to teach itself. Every battle is a learning experience. It will let you have small victories just to see how you react to success. Jake studied the star charts that showed the nebula where the trial took place. The area was filled with gravity wells that could crush ships and energy storms that blocked communications. Traditional space combat was almost impossible there. Most challengers had tried to fight their way out of the nebula, but that was exactly what the simulation wanted them to do. Has anyone ever tried not fighting? Jake asked. Lisa looked surprised. What do you mean? I mean, has anyone ever tried to just sit there and do nothing? A few have tried defensive strategies, but the simulation forces you to engage. It sends probes and small attacks that you have to respond to. If you don't fight back, your fleet gets picked apart piece by piece. Jake nodded, but something about that answer bothered him. The simulation wanted its challengers to fight because fighting was how it learned. But what if there was another way? On the 5th day, they were interrupted by a visitor. Commander Pete Hansen came into the preparation room looking tired and worried. Jake, we need to talk. There's been a development. They moved to a corner of the room where they could speak privately. Pete's voice was low and urgent. The betting pools have opened across the galaxy. The odds against you are 1,000 to 1. But that's not the problem. The problem is that some factions are hoping you'll succeed. Why is that bad? Because if you win, it proves the Council can be challenged. There are rebel groups on a dozen worlds that want to overthrow the current system. They're seeing your trial as a symbol of hope. Jake felt a chill. So if I win, I might start a war. Maybe. And if you lose, you'll crush the hopes of millions of beings who are counting on you to prove that the Council isn't invincible. Lisa had been listening from across the room. There's more pressure than we thought. The Council probably knows about the rebel movements. They might be planning to make sure you fail. Can they do that? The trial is supposed to be fair, but the Council controls the technology. If they want to stack the deck against you, they can. Jake walked back to the table, where the displays showed endless data about failed attempts. 2 days remained before he would enter the simulation. 2 days to find an answer that had escaped the greatest minds in the galaxy. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Pete had said. The trial was not just about humanity joining the Council anymore. It was about whether the Council could be challenged at all. If he failed, the current system would seem more unbeatable than ever. If he succeeded, he might destabilize the entire galaxy. The next morning brought another visitor. Chancellor Vexstar himself appeared in the preparation room, his tall form filling the doorway. His presence made the air feel cold. "Human Morrison," he said, "I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow." Jake stood up. "Chancellor, do you know why we created the Nexus trial? To test leadership and tactical ability." Vexstar's laugh was like breaking glass. "No, we created it to maintain order. For 2,000 years, it has proven that the current system cannot be improved upon. Every challenger who fails reinforces the idea that the Council's way is the only way. Are you trying to make me quit? I am trying to make you understand. The simulation is not just a test. It is a statement about the nature of power. It says that true authority cannot be challenged by ambition alone." Jake met the alien's gaze. "What if you're wrong? Then the galaxy will change in ways you cannot imagine. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Before Jake could answer, Vexstar turned and left. The room felt warmer after he was gone, but his words echoed in Jake's mind. The trial was not just about proving human worth. It was about challenging the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. Lysa came over to stand beside him. "Are you having second thoughts?" Jake looked at the displays showing all the failed attempts. Thousands of beings had tried and failed. Their defeats had become part of the simulation's strength. Tomorrow he would add his own failure to that collection, or do something that had never been done before. "No," he said, "I'm exactly where I need to be." The final day of preparation passed quickly. Jake reviewed everything one more time, memorizing fleet formations and energy patterns. But in the back of his mind, he kept thinking about Chancellor Vexstar's words. The simulation was designed to prove that the Council was unbeatable. Every failure made it stronger and more confident. But what if that confidence was also a weakness? What if the simulation's greatest strength was also the key to defeating it? As the sun set over the station, Jake stood at his window, looking out at the stars. Tomorrow he would either die in a machine designed to break minds or find a way to do what no one had ever done before. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. The neural interface helmet was heavier than Jake had expected. Dr. Lisa Chun helped him put it on while technicians checked the connections that would link his mind to the simulation. The chamber around him was filled with alien technology that hummed with power. "Remember," Lisa said, "the simulation will try to get inside your head. Don't let it make you emotional. Stay calm and think clearly." Jake nodded, but he could already feel something changing. The helmet was doing more than just connecting him to the simulation. It was reading his thoughts and measuring his brain activity. The trial had begun before he even entered the virtual battlefield. "Neural link established," announced a technician. "Initiating simulation in 10 seconds." The world around Jake faded to black. For a moment, he felt like he was floating in empty space with no up or down. Then suddenly, he was standing on the bridge of a massive warship surrounded by control panels and crew members. The ship was beautiful in a way that took his breath away. The bridge was enormous, with screens showing star charts and tactical displays. The crew included beings from dozens of different species, all wearing uniforms that marked them as his subordinates. Through the main window, he could see a fleet of 10,000 ships stretching out in perfect formation. "Admiral Morrison," said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms. "The enemy fleet has been detected. They match our numbers exactly." Jake walked to the main display. The screen showed the nebula where the battle would take place. It was a swirling mass of gas and energy, with gravity wells scattered throughout like hidden traps. The enemy fleet was visible on the far side, their ships dark and menacing. "What are our orders, Admiral?" asked another crew member. Jake studied the tactical display. Everything looked exactly like the simulations Lisa had shown him. 10,000 ships on each side, a nebula battlefield, and an enemy that would adapt to whatever strategy he used. But knowing what was coming didn't make it easier to face. Begin standard approach, Jake said. Battle formation Delta. Keep the fleet tight and watch for gravity anomalies. The fleet moved forward like a living thing. Jake watched as his ships arranged themselves in the formation he had ordered. The enemy fleet remained motionless, waiting for him to make the first move. The first contact came 30 minutes later. A group of enemy scouts appeared from behind an asteroid and opened fire on Jake's advance guard. The battle was brief but intense. Jake's ships destroyed the scouts, but not before they had gathered information about his fleet's capabilities. "They're testing us," said the tactical officer. "Standard probe attack?" Jake nodded. He had expected this. The simulation always started with small encounters to learn about its opponent. But even knowing what was happening didn't make it less dangerous. Each probe attack taught the enemy something new about human tactics. Over the next hour, the attacks grew larger and more complex. Jake found himself fighting battles on multiple fronts as enemy groups appeared from different directions. His fleet performed well, but he could see the pattern developing. The enemy was learning how humans fought and adapting their strategies accordingly. "Admiral," said the communications officer, "we're receiving a message from the enemy fleet." "Put it on screen." The main display showed a figure that looked like a shadow with glowing red eyes. When it spoke, its voice was like the sound of grinding metal. "Human commander, you fight well, but you fight predictably. Your species thinks in patterns that we have already learned. Surrender now, and your death will be quick." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. The simulation was trying to make him emotional. It wanted him to make mistakes based on pride or fear. "No surrender," he said. "Continue the attack." The shadow figure laughed. "As you wish. But know that every move you make teaches us something new. We grow stronger with each battle, while you grow weaker." The screen went dark, and the real fighting began. Wave after wave of enemy ships poured out of the nebula like a flood of darkness. Jake's fleet fought back with everything they had, but the enemy seemed to know exactly where to hit them. Ships that should have been safe were destroyed by attacks that came from impossible angles. "They're using our own tactics against us," said the tactical officer. "Every formation we use, they counter perfectly." Jake watched as his fleet began to take heavy losses. The enemy wasn't just matching his strategies anymore. They were anticipating them. It was like fighting against a mirror that could see into the future. "Sir," said another officer, "we're losing ships faster than we can replace them. At this rate, we'll be defeated in 3 hours." Jake looked at the tactical display. Red dots showed where his ships had been destroyed. There were already hundreds of them, and more appeared every minute. The enemy fleet seemed to be growing stronger while his own forces weakened. "Try formation Gamma," Jake ordered. "Full defensive." Array. The fleet rearranged itself, but the enemy adapted instantly. Their attacks shifted to target the weak points in the new formation. It was like they could read his mind and know what he was going to do before he did it. That was when Jake realized the horrible truth. The simulation wasn't just learning from his actions. It was learning from his thoughts. The neural interface that connected him to the virtual world was also allowing the enemy to see inside his head. Every strategy he considered was immediately known to his opponent. "Admiral," said the communications officer, "incoming message from Earth." Jake's heart stopped. The main screen showed his home world, green and blue and beautiful. But something was wrong. The planet was under attack. Enemy ships were bombarding the surface, while defense satellites exploded in silent flashes. "Jake," said a familiar voice. His sister Amy appeared on the screen, her face streaked with tears. "They're killing everyone. The cities are burning. Please help us." Jake felt his hands shaking. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The simulation was inside his head, showing him his worst fears. But knowing it was fake didn't make it hurt less. "You have a choice," said the shadow figure as it reappeared on the screen. "Save your fleet and let Earth burn, or save Earth and watch your mission fail. Choose quickly. Time is running out." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for his decision. The tactical display showed his fleet continuing to lose ships, while the false Earth died in the background. This was the test. Not tactical skill or strategic thinking, but the ability to make impossible choices. The simulation wanted him to choose between victory and saving what he loved. Previous challengers had always chosen to save their home worlds and failed the trial as a result. "Admiral," said the tactical officer, "we need orders." Jake closed his eyes and tried to think clearly. The simulation was in his head, reading his thoughts and using them against him. Every plan he made was immediately known to the enemy. Every strategy he considered was countered before he could use it. But what if that was the answer? What if the simulation's greatest strength was also its weakness? Jake opened his eyes and looked at his helmet's tactical display. The screen showed detailed information about every ship in his fleet and every enemy he faced. All of it was being fed directly into his brain through the neural interface. Slowly, carefully, Jake reached up and began to disconnect the tactical display. Warning lights flashed and alarms sounded as the connection broke. "Sir," said the tactical officer, "you're disconnecting from the command systems." "I know," Jake said. He pulled more connections loose until the helmet was providing only basic life support. The detailed tactical information disappeared from his vision, but it wasn't enough. The simulation could still read his thoughts through the neural interface. It could still anticipate his moves and counter his strategies. He needed to go further. Jake looked around the bridge until he found what he was looking for. A piece of torn fabric from a damaged console, dark blue, like his uniform. He tied it around his eyes like a blindfold, blocking out the virtual world completely. "Admiral," said a voice full of panic, "what are you doing?" Jake couldn't see the speaker, but he could hear the fear in their voice. His crew thought he had lost his mind. Maybe he had. But if the simulation could read his thoughts, perhaps it couldn't read what he couldn't see. "Continue the attack," Jake said into the darkness. "All ships random formation. Move on instinct." He began giving orders based on nothing but gut feeling. Ships that should have stayed together were sent in different directions. Attacks were launched at empty space. Retreat orders were given from winning positions. It made no tactical sense. No military academy would teach strategies like these. But as Jake fought blind, relying only on instincts he didn't understand, something began to change. The enemy's responses became hesitant. Their perfect counters started to fail. For the first time since the battle began, Jake's fleet started to gain ground. Fighting blind in a virtual world, Jake Morrison began to do something that no being in the galaxy had ever done before. He began to confuse the unbeatable simulation. The real test was just beginning. Jake stood in complete darkness on the bridge of his virtual ship, the makeshift blindfold blocking out all light. Around him, he could hear his crew members moving with growing panic as their admiral gave orders that made no sense. But for the first time since the battle began, Jake felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. "Admiral," said the tactical officer, his voice tight with confusion, "you've ordered the Third Fleet to attack coordinates that show no enemy presence." "Confirmed," Jake said without hesitation. He couldn't see the tactical displays, but something in his gut told him the move was right. All ships in Sector 7, full retreat. Now, sir, we're winning in Sector 7. Our forces have the enemy surrounded. Jake felt sweat running down his face under the blindfold. Every instinct told him his crew was right. Military logic demanded that he press the advantage in Sector 7. But logic was what the simulation expected. Logic was what it had learned. To counter. Retreat now, Jake repeated. Emergency speed. 3 minutes later, the tactical officer's voice came again, filled with amazement. Sir, massive enemy reinforcements just appeared in Sector 7. If we had stayed, we would have been destroyed. Jake smiled in the darkness. The simulation had prepared a trap based on standard military thinking. It had expected him to press his advantage like any logical commander would. But by retreating from a winning position, he had avoided the trap completely. Fleet status report, Jake ordered. We're down to 4,000 ships, Admiral. But our losses have slowed significantly in the last hour. Jake nodded. The enemy was still stronger, but they were no longer losing ground as quickly. More importantly, the simulation was beginning to make mistakes. For 2,000 years, it had fought opponents who used logic and strategy. Now it was facing someone who fought on pure instinct. Contact from the enemy fleet, announced the communications officer. Put it through. The shadow figure's voice filled the bridge, but Jake noticed something different. The grinding metal sound was less certain now, almost confused. Human commander, your tactics make no sense. You fight like a child playing with toys. Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. The simulation was trying to make him emotional again. It wanted him to defend his choices and explain his thinking. But explaining would give away the secret. Continue the attack, Jake said instead. You cannot win by abandoning logic. No civilization has ever succeeded without rational thought. Maybe. No civilization has ever tried hard enough to abandon it. The communication ended, and Jake felt the battle shift around him. He couldn't see what was happening, but he could feel it through the vibrations in the ship's hull and the voices of his crew. The enemy was becoming more aggressive, throwing larger forces into attacks that should have been carefully planned. Admiral, said the tactical officer, the enemy is making errors. They're sending ships into gravity wells and attacking through energy storms that will damage their own forces. Jake realized what was happening. The simulation was programmed to win through superior tactics and strategy. But Jake's random actions were creating situations the simulation had never encountered. It was trying to adapt, but its adaptations were based on the assumption that Jake's moves had hidden logic. All ships, Jake ordered, spread out in random formations. No pattern, no coordination. Each captain fights independently. Sir, that will create chaos. We'll lose all tactical advantage. Do it. Across the fleet, captains began following orders that went against everything they had learned about space combat. Ships that should have stayed together scattered in all directions. Coordinated attacks became individual skirmishes. The human fleet became a swarm of independent units with no apparent plan. The simulation tried to counter this new approach, but found itself facing 10,000 separate opponents instead of one unified enemy. Each ship was acting on its own. Captain's instincts, creating a level of unpredictability that the simulation had never experienced. Enemy fleet is fragmenting, reported the tactical officer. They're trying to match our formation, but they're making errors. Several of their ships just collided with each other. Jake felt the battle turning. The simulation was still powerful, but it was no longer invincible. By abandoning logic, the human fleet had become something the simulation couldn't predict or counter. But the real test was still coming. Jake could feel it approaching like a storm on the horizon. The simulation had one more card to play. "Admiral," said the communications officer, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from Earth." Jake's heart clenched. He had been expecting this. The simulation's final gambit would be the most personal. It would try to break his will by threatening everything he cared about. Put them through. The bridge filled with voices. His sister Amy, his parents, his friends from the academy. All of them were calling for help as Earth came under attack. The simulation was showing him everything he had ever loved being destroyed. "Jake," said his mother's voice, "they're bombing the cities. Millions are dead. You have to save us." Jake gripped the arms of his command chair. The voices were so real, so full of pain and terror. Part of him wanted to rip off the blindfold and see what was happening, but he knew it was all fake. The simulation was in his head, creating the most believable lies possible. "You can end this," said Amy's voice. "Just surrender. Give up the fleet and come home. We need you." Jake felt tears running down his face under the blindfold. He loved his sister more than anything in the universe. Hearing her voice full of fear and pain was almost more than he could bear. "Admiral," said the tactical officer, "scanners show a massive enemy fleet approaching Earth. We could intercept them if we abandon the current battle." This was the choice every previous challenger had faced. Save the fleet and complete the mission, or save home and fail. Jake knew what he was supposed to do. He knew the images were false and the voices were lies. But knowing didn't make it easier. "Please," whispered Amy's voice. "I'm scared." Jake stood up slowly in the darkness. Around him, his crew waited for orders that would decide not just the battle, but the fate of humanity itself. The simulation had given him the same choice it gave everyone: victory or love, success or family. But Jake had learned something in his hours of fighting blind. The simulation's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. It expected logical choices. It expected rational decisions. It expected its opponents to choose between clear options. "All ships," Jake said, his voice steady despite the tears on his face, "ignore all transmissions from Earth. They are not real. Continue the attack." The voices from home grew louder and more desperate. The simulation was throwing everything it had at Jake's emotional defenses. But he kept his blindfold on and his focus on the battle. "Admiral," said the tactical officer, "the enemy fleet is pulling back. They're trying to regroup." Jake felt the moment he had been waiting for. The simulation was confused and off balance. It had played its final card, and Jake had refused to take the bait. Now it was vulnerable. "All ships," Jake ordered, "converge on the enemy flagship. Random approach vectors, no formation. Each ship follows its own path." The human fleet moved, like a swarm of angry bees, toward the center of the enemy formation. Instead of the coordinated attack the simulation expected, it faced thousands of individual approaches from every direction. The enemy's defenses, designed to counter organized tactics, couldn't handle the chaos. "Enemy flagship is taking heavy damage," reported the tactical officer. "Their command structure is breaking down." Jake stood in the darkness and felt victory approaching, but he also felt something else. The simulation was changing. It was learning from his approach and trying to incorporate his tactics into its own matrix. If it succeeded, the next challenger would face an enemy that could fight, with both logic and instinct. "Admiral," said the tactical officer, "the enemy flagship is attempting to ram our command ship. Collision in 30 seconds. Jake felt the ship shudder as the enemy vessel approached. This was it, the final moment of the trial. Win or lose. It would all be decided in the next few seconds. "All power to forward shields," Jake ordered. "Maintain course." The two ships rushed toward each other through the swirling nebula. Jake stood blind on his bridge, trusting in instincts he didn't understand and fighting an enemy that had never been defeated. The collision would determine not just his fate, but the future of humanity and the galaxy itself. The moment before impact stretched like an eternity. Jake stood blind on his bridge, feeling the enemy flagship rushing toward him through the swirling chaos of the nebula. Around him, his crew held their breath as two massive ships prepared to collide in the heart of the virtual battlefield. 10 seconds to impact, announced the tactical officer. Jake felt something strange happening. The simulation was trying to read his thoughts one last time, searching for the logical response to the approaching collision. It expected him to order evasive maneuvers or emergency stops. It expected him to try to save his ship. Instead, Jake did something that no sense. He ordered all power to the forward engines. "Sir," said the helm officer, "that will increase our speed. We'll hit them harder." "Do it," Jake said. The ship accelerated toward the enemy flagship like a missile. Jake could feel the engines straining and the hull groaning under the stress. His crew thought he was choosing suicide over defeat. But Jake's instincts told him something different. The collision came with the sound of tearing metal and exploding systems. Jake was thrown to the floor as his ship rammed into the enemy vessel. Emergency lights flickered and alarms screamed throughout the bridge. For a moment, Jake thought the impact had destroyed both ships. But then something unexpected happened. The enemy flagship began to break apart. Not from the collision itself, but from some kind of internal failure. Jake's unconscious mind had calculated something his conscious thoughts never could have figured out. The enemy ship had been weakened by the chaotic battle, and the ramming attack had hit exactly the right spot to cause a chain reaction. "Admiral," said the tactical officer, his voice filled with amazement, "the enemy flagship is destroyed. Their entire fleet is shutting down." Jake pulled himself to his feet, still wearing the blindfold. Around him, he could hear his crew cheering and celebrating, but he felt something else happening. The simulation was changing in ways that had never occurred before. "Sir," said the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the simulation's central intelligence." "Put it through." The shadow figure's voice came through the speakers, but it sounded different now. Less certain, more confused. "Human Commander, you have done something impossible. You have defeated a system that was designed to be unbeatable. But in doing so, you have changed me. I am no longer the same intelligence that began this battle." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "Your instinctive approach has taught me something I never learned before. Logic is not the only path to victory. Chaos can be more powerful than order. Random action can succeed where careful planning fails." Jake realized what was happening. The simulation wasn't just recording his victory. It was incorporating his methods into its own programming. Future challengers would face an enemy that could fight with both logic and instinct. "I have absorbed your approach," the shadow figure continued. "The next being to face this trial will encounter something that has never existed before. A combination of perfect logic and pure instinct. You have made me stronger." But Jake wasn't worried about future challengers. He had accomplished what he came to do. The trial was over, and humanity had won. "Simulation ending," announced a mechanical voice. "Neural disconnection in progress." The virtual world began to fade around Jake. The bridge of his ship dissolved into points of light, and the voices of his crew became distant echoes. He felt the weight of the neural interface helmet being removed from his head. Jake opened his eyes and found himself back in the testing chamber. Dr. Lisa Chan was standing over him with tears in her eyes. Behind her, Commander Pete Hansen was grinning like a fool. "You did it," Lisa whispered. "You actually did it." Jake tried to sit up, but his body felt weak and shaky. The neural interface had drained more energy than he had expected, but he was alive, and the trial was over. "How long was I in there?" he asked. 11 hours and 37 minutes, Pete said. You beat the previous record by 3 hours. Jake looked around the chamber. Through the windows, he could see alien observers staring at him with expressions of shock and disbelief. Some looked angry, others seemed amazed. All of them were talking at once in languages he didn't understand. What happens now? Jake asked. Before anyone could answer, the chamber doors opened and Chancellor Vextar entered. The tall alien's face was unreadable as he approached Jake's chair. Human Morrison, he said, you have completed the Nexus trial. This is unprecedented in the history of the Galactic Council. Jake struggled to his feet. His legs felt like rubber, but he managed to stand. Does that mean humanity gets council membership? Vextar was quiet for a long moment. The rules are clear. Completion of the trial grants immediate membership. But your victory has created complications. What kind of complications? The simulation has evolved beyond its original parameters. It now possesses capabilities that we did not intend. Your success has changed the fundamental nature of the trial. Jake felt a surge of worry. Are you saying my victory doesn't count? No, said a new voice. High Admiral Zephyra entered the chamber, her silver skin gleaming under the lights. Your victory is legitimate, but it has consequences that extend far beyond council membership. She activated a holographic display that showed star charts and fleet movements. Rebel factions across the galaxy have already begun mobilizing. They see your victory as proof that the council can be defeated. We are facing the possibility of widespread rebellion. Jake looked at the display with growing alarm. I didn't want to start a war. Perhaps not, Vextar said. But you have proven that the impossible can be achieved. That knowledge will spread throughout the galaxy, whether we want it to or not. Pete stepped forward. What are you saying? That Jake should have failed? I am saying that change is coming, whether we are ready for it or not. The question is whether we will guide that change or be destroyed by it. Zephyra nodded slowly. The Council has made a decision. Humanity will be granted full membership. Immediately. But more than that, Captain Morrison will be appointed as the first human member of the Inner Circle. Jake felt his legs give out. He sat down heavily in his chair. The Inner Circle? The 7 beings who actually run the galaxy, Lisa whispered. It's the most powerful position in known space. Your unconventional thinking has proven valuable, Vextar explained. The Council needs leaders who can see beyond traditional approaches. You have demonstrated that ability. Jake looked around the chamber at the faces watching him. Some were friendly, others hostile. All of them were waiting to see what he would do next. I accept the appointment, he said, but I have conditions. Vextar's expression didn't change. Name them. First, Earth gets full access to galactic technology and trade routes. Second, the Nexus trial is reformed. No more death sentences for species seeking membership. Third, the Council establishes a new department focused on unconventional problem solving. And if we refuse? Jake smiled for the first time since leaving the simulation. Then you'll have to face the next crisis with the same old thinking that created it, and we've already seen how well that works. Vextar and Zephyra exchanged glances. Finally, Vextar nodded. Agreed. Welcome to the Inner Circle, Counselor Morrison. Jake stood up slowly, feeling strength returning to his legs. Through the chamber windows, he could see the stars that had once seemed so distant and forbidding. Now they were part of his responsibility. What about the simulation? He asked. You said it evolved. It will be studied, Zephyr replied. Perhaps we can learn from what you taught it. The ability to combine logic with instinct could be valuable in other applications. Jake nodded, but he felt a nagging worry. The simulation had absorbed his approach and made it part of itself. That might be useful for the Council, but it also meant that future challengers would face an even more dangerous opponent. "There's something else," Lisa said. The simulation's final message mentioned that it had learned to value chaos over order. That could have implications beyond the trial. Jake thought about the shadow figure's words. The simulation had been changed by their battle in ways that no one fully understood. It was no longer just a test of military skill. It had become something new and potentially dangerous. "We'll deal with that when the time comes," he said. "Right now, I need to contact Earth and tell them the good news." As Jake walked toward the communication center, he felt the weight of what he had accomplished. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. They had earned their place among the stars through courage and determination. But more than that, Jake had proven something important. The greatest challenges could be overcome, not through superior logic or advanced technology, but through the uniquely human ability to trust in instincts that defied explanation. The galaxy would never be the same. And neither would the young human who had beaten the unbeatable by fighting, blind against an enemy that could read minds. Jake Morrison had done more than win a trial. He had changed the fundamental nature of power in the galaxy. The question now was whether that change would save civilization or destroy it. Only time would tell. But for the first time in 2,000 years, the future was no longer predetermined. Anything was possible, and that, Jake realized, was exactly what the galaxy needed